This place is like so much more legit than most bookstore.
It's like full on brick and mortar. They own every floor.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Center for Fiction. Okay. Can you hear me now? All right. Hi, I'm Melanie McNair. I'm the Senior Director of Public Programming here at the Center for Fiction. How many of you are joining us for the first time this evening? Awesome. Well, you are all very welcome. What is the Center for Fiction? We are investing in the future of story with a focus on fiction. We're a home for readers and writers, and here in downtown Brooklyn, we provide space for the city's creative community to write and read and talk books over coffee. We offer reading groups and writing workshops and steward a historic lending library. And we support early career writers through our nationally recognized First Novel Prize and we mentor a cohort of 9 talented emerging writer fellows every year. And we do lots of really fun events. So check us out, follow us on social media, sign up for our mailing list so you don't miss out on anything cool. Welcome also to those of you who are joining us via the live stream tonight. A couple of logistical concerns. After the talk and reading, we'll have an audience question and answer session. If you're here in the room, please raise your hand, and we'll bring a microphone to you so that the people who are watching on the live stream can hear you as well. And if you are watching the live stream, you can type your question into the chat at any time, and we'll read from those before we break for the signing line. All the copies of the anthology are pre-signed, but you're welcome to stick around and get them personalized after. And also, James has a few things that he'll be selling in the back of the room, so don't run away as soon as it's over. Now, you might wonder why a literary nonprofit with a focus on fiction is doing a punk event, and that's a fair question. As we know, storytelling is universal, but in the world of publishing and media broadly, there's been a hierarchy of whose stories are held up, reproduced, and given attention to, and whose are ignored. There are so many firsts that are still happening, and they are all a cause for celebration. This collection, Black Punk Now, is the first of its kind collection of Black punk voices, and we are here for it, and so are you. Thank you. Please welcome the editors James Spooner, father of Afropunk, and Chris Terry, punk singer and author, along with contributors Mariah Stovall and Honeychild Coleman, and the legend himself, Grammy Award-winning guitarist, composer, and visual artist, leader of the band Living Color, Vernon Reid. Please give him a big shout out.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Hi. Hey. All right.
Yeah, great to see so many familiar faces and all these new ones. So let's get into it, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of people. We brought all of our friends. We're here to hang out, and we want to keep it moving pretty quick. So James and I think we're just going to read the author's note at the beginning of the book. That ought to kind of give you an idea of what it's all about. We have a couple of our contributors here, and we're really happy to have Vernon Reid joining us as well.
All right, so yeah, these editor's notes I think will kind of explain what the book is about, why we did it, etc. So let's do that. Mine is called After Afropunk. I bought a computer on credit in 2001. One of the first things I did after sparking up my dial-up modem was Google Black Punk. There were exactly 0 links. In all of the World Wide Web, I was alone. Living in New York City, I knew I wasn't the only one, but sitting there in front of my Macintosh G3, it felt that way. I had to tell our story. I lived in a newly gentrified building in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, but all the old tenants hadn't moved out as planned. There were rats pounding, screaming, suffocating in the walls. At times, I could relate to them more than my roommates. I was angry. Punks usually are, about something. I had a documentary in mind, a film that was meant to critique the punk community, the people I'd come to think of as family. At this point, 23 years old, with a decade in the scene, my love had soured, and I began to resent all those white kids who didn't see race. I went on to hunt for people like me who identified as Black and punk. I found a kid in Iowa who was in 6 bands and essentially ran the Midwest scene. I found a collective of women in New York's outer borough, who started a showcase to promote themselves as Black female solo artists. I found a Black hacker whose brother was in a Black power hardcore band with a bunch of white guys. Their stories were my story, and mine was theirs. All told, I interviewed just short of 90 people and strung together their stories together into a documentary, unknowingly giving us and so many others an identity, Afropunk. Thanks. Afropunk gave us a much-needed framework for conversation. In the spirit of DIY, I used the documentary as a springboard to build a Black community within the scene. It was working. For years, in the mid-aughts, Black alternative kids from around the country would eagerly anticipate Afropunk events. I called them the liberation sessions, because what's more liberating than a mosh pit full of smiling Black faces? The bands were the fans, and the fans were the bands. While we were in those rooms, no one thought about how white punks saw us. No one cared if they knew we existed. We defined ourselves. It was everything punk rock should be. Screenings turned into concerts, and concerts turned into a festival. Afropunk the film turned into Afropunk, trademark, the brand. And as mainstream interests grow, the dangling carrot of capitalism lured me in. I wanted it to grow. I wanted all the Black weirdos across America feel what we were feeling in those rooms. But organic growth and corporate sponsorship don't go together. I made missteps I couldn't turn back from, and before I knew it, there was nothing punk about Afropunk anymore. I bailed. With me out of the way, Afropunk, trademark, became a corporate international brand, promoting major label hip hop and R&B. A new generation of Black punks showed up to the fest, and we're disappointed to find that the few rock acts were hidden on a stage no one could find. Afropunk, trademark, did nothing to support the needs of Afropunks. Cries of co-opting culture were drowned out by clickbait featuring fabulously costumed concertgoers. Once again, the angry underground took to action. Kids from all over the room stuck their middle fingers high, kids from all over the country stuck their middle fingers high into the air, pointing directly at Afropunk, trademark. The underground needs the mainstream so far as it needs something to react against. The new generation of active Black punks went on to start their own festivals, collectives, and conversations. That is where this book, Black Punk Now, centers itself. Some of the people I met while making the film are represented. Cartoonist Joanna Davis McGallicat memorializes her brother Matt, the scene maker from Iowa. Lyanna Dowes interviews the Black women who made up the Sister Girl Riot. Hacktivist Matt Mitchell talks ones and zeros with Ashaki M. Jackson. A younger group of writers, comic creators, and band leaders continue the conversation that my documentary, Afropunk, started. To read this collection of essays, stories, interviews, and comics from the after Afropunk generation is a blessing. No longer alone, I'm proud to call these folks my family. Thanks.
Felix, for you, here. You know, the first time I saw Afropunk was across the street at BAM 20 years ago. All right, part 2 of the editor's note. So we had After Afropunk and Beyond Bad Brains is my part. I had to gamble on music in junior high, spending my birthday money on the cheapest releases by the punk bands that I'd spied on other skaters' shirts. The safest bet was usually an EP, a few songs for a few bucks, and it didn't always pay off. The less it said about that slow Black Flag joint, the better. But when it did, it was more than a game changer. It was a life changer. I hit the jackpot with Spirit Electricity by Bad Brains, 6 songs for $4.99 at the Strip Mall record store by the soup and salad spot that my mom loved. Bad Brains had stopped me in my tracks when I saw them in Thrasher, a black band credited with taking punk to the next level. I had to hear it. I grew up with a Hendrix and Thin Lizzy loving black father, but was quickly learning that being black and liking hard guitar music were mutually exclusive outside our house in early 90s Boston. Spirit Electricity let me bring a feeling of home with me as I set out on my skateboard. Bad Brains showed me that I could be me, and I put Let Me Help on dozens of mixtapes for new friends, hoping that this lightning-fast black punk band would provide me context as I rolled through my burb with an Afro pick in my hoodie pocket. My family moved to Richmond, Virginia. As I started going to DIY shows, I learned about polystyrene from X-Ray Specs and Bubba Dupree from Void, and even met a handful of other young black punks. But still, I was having a hard time reconciling my blackness with my punkness. I wish there was more out there. It still felt like you could be Bad Brains or you could be white. Even today, when I talk about black punk, Bad Brains are the first name that people mention, and they deserve it. They are the first and best hardcore punk band. Music they released 40 years ago still gets me so amped that my pits start to smell when I hear it. But while I've been busy with Spirit Electricity, exciting new music and art has been appearing, and I was really glad to use this book as a chance to get caught up and share a bunch of it here. A goal of black punk now is to give punks, especially the black ones, a wider frame of reference, to show all of the strains, styles, and identities of black punk that are thriving, and give newcomers to the scene more chances to see themselves. So when James and I say beyond Bad Brains, we're talking about world-stretching fiction like Mariah Stovall's feminist fairy tale, The Princess in the Pit, which we're going to hear some of this evening, and the queer collective house sci-fi of Alex Smith's Smoke Again Akai. We mean calls to action, like Golden Sunrise Collier's How To, Big Takeover, zines as freedom technology for black punks and other marginalized groups. And since punk is not punk without righteous, innovative music, we're spending time with life-affirming newer bands like Soul Glow, whose singer Pierce Jordan does a deep dive on the lyrics to their song Jump or Get Jumped by the Future. And Rough Francis, whose front person, Bobby Hackney Jr., shares the story of discovering his own father's proto-punk past in Punk Family Business. When we were first talking to Soft Skull Press about doing black punk now, they asked if we could define black punk. We said it's punk by black people, and that can mean a lot of things. While there are common themes and threads that wind throughout this book, like liberation, community, and inheritance, the modes of expression and points of view are as varied as the black people who share them. The pieces in Black Punk Now work together to create a big picture, a holistic definition of black punk where every piece stands on level ground. And if you're a kid with a pick in your hoodie pocket, plus some cash from your aunt, and a list of punk bands you want to hear, this book is for you. I hope you see your future self in these pages. Thank you. Thank you. James, will you get on the remote and bring up the picture of Honeychild? Someone's always got to have the remote, right?
That's you.
That's my armpit 20 years ago. We have a young James.
That's me. There's Honeychild.
We have some pictures from our vacation, too, if you see them. James, how did you meet Honeychild?
Okay, so the first time that I heard of Honeychild, I worked at the John Fluvog shoe store in Seattle, and she worked at the New York store. So I would have to call the New York store to be like, do you guys have any 60410s in blue rub-off size 10, you know? And there was you worked at the Seattle store at some point, right?
I did an exchange with Maria. We did like an apartment swap for 3 weeks in a summer.
So there was a photo of you in the shop, and so it was always like, you know, I knew that she existed. And then I came to New York. Living in Seattle, just came to visit, come back to New York, and I went into the Fluvog shop, and I don't know if you remember this, or you wouldn't remember this, but I was just in there, and I saw you, but I was too nervous to say anything to you.
Aww.
And so as I was leaving, you were like, hey, and I turned around, and you're like, I like your shoes. So like a year later, when I finally moved back, within the first week, someone told me to go check out a Honeychild show, and you played at this place in the Lower East Side that was like a living room.
The furniture store.
Yeah, it was like.
Oh, wow.
And I came up to you and I was like, like, you hadn't performed yet. And I was like, are you in Honeychild? And you're like, I am Honeychild. So, yeah. So, I mean, it was just like, you were like present all the way up until when I went to make the film, and people were like, oh, you have to talk to Honeychild. I was like, of course, so.
All right. So Honeychild Coleman busked in New York City's subways in 1993 and collaborated with Ilbient and dub reggae DJs. A co-founder and organizer of Sister Girl Riots as of 1998, she worked with The Slits, Mad Professor, The Velt, and Roz Mezzanai. Featured in documentaries Afropunk, Sounds of Justice, Fireflies, Getting My Name Up There, and Rock Chicks, she fronts Blues Punk's The 1865 and Post Punk's Backslider. Her songs are in the film Mariah, and the 1865's music is in television series Woke and Everything's Gonna Be All White. Her story is from her novel in progress, Black Girl, Blue Hair. Please welcome Honeychild Coleman. Come on up.
I have it. Thank you.
Do you need some water?
Oh, I'll wait. Thank you. Never in all my years did I think I would be reading a punk memoir in a bookstore. This is awesome. There's a song called Echelon that this story is named after. This chapter is Beepers and Creepers, dedicated to my DJ partner, Super Jen. Lyrics from the song. It's understood 10,000 times. I hang up as a metal blade, and my hands I cut on your receiver. Lenny and I met by happenstance 2 years ago on a rainy late autumn Friday night. Our mutual friend Todd introduced us. They worked together designing high-end messenger bags. That night was their monthly happy hour DJ party. When I arrived at Open Air Bar, Lenny was standing tall in high platform sneakers beneath her ankle-length cargo pocketed skirt. I peeked into the booth after hugging Todd as they were playing a tag team set of punk, electro-funk, and new wave, shifting between mashup CDs and vinyl. Lenny and I instantly bonded on taste in music and fashion sense. Her deconstructed cyber design spoke to the sci-fi nerd in me with just a touch of tank girl feelings, yet somehow all her own. Lenny gets mistaken for Meg White from the White Stripes all the time, even though they have nothing in common except both being petite and, well, white. You two should play a set together, Todd said. After our introduction, the room behind the DJ booth was getting steamy, and Todd's chunky black frame glasses fogged up, blending in with his extremely pale face and shaven head under the black light. I don't know how he could even see the mixer through the fog, but he kept playing, and while Lenny and I hung out, she and I sat in a corner booth talking about music and admiring each other's patent leather dog collars. I wasn't so ambitious about spinning. Some friends had hired me to DJ at goth weddings, but suddenly I realized, true, the idea of doing a weekly party appealed to me, and it would also justify my crate digging habit. I'm in. Lenny and I attempted to start our own DJ night in a few dive bars around Alphabet City to no avail, but then our friend Patty, the legendary house party DJ, needed someone to cover her at Botanica on Tuesdays. The managers took a liking to us and offered us a Saturday night spot. We spin whatever we want as long as the energy's up and the drinks are flowing until 2 a.m. I know tell me if I'm coming up on the time mark. Okay, cool.
Give us a little more, please.
Yeah. So imagine, this is a time when women weren't so prevalent in DJing, so we got a lot of slack for being behind the decks. Lenny plays metal and breakcore with rare 1960s one-hit pop wonders mixed in. I play mostly punk and some new indie rock and have a penchant for 60s sound effects as interludes. Often drunken fools will come up and shove CDs in our face saying, "Put this on." Sometimes they try to come behind the DJ coffin, which is our makeshift booth, and look through our records. Every so often, there's an indie A&R person who digs our set and gifts us with some up-and-coming vinyl. That's how I fell in love with Shocking Pinks and Block Party. Once a guy randomly walked up without saying a word and just started scratching my block party record, and his friends dragged him away. But he left such a large scratch on it that it kept skipping. I asked security guard to bring him back to the booth. "This is an import limiting pressing, fool," I yelled at his friends. They actually did feel bad and coughed up a $20 bill before carrying their drunken bro up the steps and out of the bar. Thank you.
Thank you, Honeychild. That was from a time when an import record cost $20, I guess.
Yes, for one song.
We used to be a country. Our next guest, Mariah Stovall. Oh, we need her. She has a great new book out on Soft Skull Press called I Love You So Much, It's Killing Us Both. And she's been touring with that recently, and we're so glad that you're taking some time out of that to come hang out with us and to read from your contribution. The Princess in the Pit is the first story in Black Punk Now. So Mariah has a very short bio.
I think you already said it, kind of, I think.
Yep. Her first novel, I Love You So Much, It's Killing Us Both, will be published by Soft Skull Press. All right, let's hear The Princess in the Pit. Thank you, Mariah.
I think I'm tall enough for the microphone. I don't know. Can you hear me?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. This is a fairy tale, and the beginning is Rapunzel, and then the second half is a West African story called How Anansi Took Aso as his wife, but I'm going to read from the beginning. The witch finds her in sweet soil by the river and figures, why not? She shushes her cries and listens for footsteps on the wind. All's quiet. She must be royal, per the cloth she swaddled in, discarded for not being a son. The witch scoffs. She prefers sweet girls. She rubs the keloid on her chin twice for good luck, scoops the babe into her arm, and calls her Rapunzel. If she squints, she can see her own face in the child's. A new face, however familiar, is welcomed by the lonely. The witch has been in exile for so long and for such hazy reasons that her reputation as revered, if feared, has crumbled. The new generation of humans thinks her harmless if they believe in her at all. As new magics, more mechanical than hers, arrived in the village, land sprawled toward industry, pushing old ways and old women to the outskirts. Before the oracles scattered into hiding, they told of a spider woman with many faces who will one day rain havoc on the tidy, shining world. Until then, the witch has the babe to keep busy. The forest gives them everything they need. They never venture outside into the thicket. Zell, the princess, grows grand and beautiful in flesh and spirit and short on brains. The witch teaches her to press oils from the fruits and nuts on the bushes. Together, they work them into Zell's hair every evening. Her hair coils in every direction and puffs like clouds, thick as the loudest clap of thunder and dark as the beetle shells in the night. The only time Zell sits still is when they detangle it each dawn. The witch tries not to worry that Zell isn't interested in the practical arts of stitching hides and starting fires. Instead, Zell imitates the animals' calls for hours on end. She loves the predator's growls most of all. She wishes they'd come closer, and she's not sure if she would run to them or from them, only that it would be an honor to face them. But they never come close because the witch's magic makes their camp safe for all the little birds. Would you like to try singing, like the things with feathers? The witch asks one afternoon. Zell laughs and carries on her favorite dance, which is climbing to the top of the canopy of trees and jumping into a heap of leaves. Then she springs to her feet and slams back and forth between the tree trunks that grow in a perfect circle, shouting all the while. Zell's throat blisters and her skin stings with scrapes. The witch harvests honey and smears a salve on to soothe her. Zell never scars. She stays beautiful. She grows bigger and her hair grows longer. The witch forgets the prophecy of the spider woman and no longer wonders if the goddess will be a friend or a foe. She gets sick with a new worry. What if Zell's hair catches on a twig or a thorn and her lovely neck snaps in half? She'd warned Zell to be careful, but she loves her too much to interrupt her snarling and slam dancing. Zell probably wouldn't hear her anyway. The witch wipes her tears and whispers a secret spell, rubbing the keloid on her chin thrice to cast it. From this day on, Zell's hair will never hurt her, so long as Zell protects it at all costs. Most importantly, she must never cut it, not even an inch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah and Honeychild. I love the detail of the keloid. It's very tactile.
Yeah. Also, that's a black thing, right? Do white people get keloid? I don't.
I'm so glad you said that. That is a nuance that is very cultural.
Okay, I'm like, did I make up that it's not? Okay, so there's no whited.
I know
white
some
keloids
Italians
in
with keloids.
Okay,
Really?
fair, yeah.
It's
Okay.
more likely that they form with highly melanated skin. So the lighter you are, the less likely they are to form. But so, on the browner end of the spectrum, they do tend to appear a lot more easily.
Thank you.
All right.
Asked and answered.
And also, on that point, keloids have always been a part of the conversation in the community. It's just a part. Hey, one collard greens, one cornbread. By the way, is that a keloid? It's true.
Do you want to let them in a little bit on how your story, like where the punk kind of weaves in a little bit more?
Sure. So the human developers come into the forest and push the witch and the princess out, and to protect her, the witch kind of locks her up in this empty concrete apartment that turns out to be above a DIY venue. And so there ends up being a hole in the floor of like her prison apartment, which is also the ceiling of the venue, and that is where the prince comes up and brings her down into the DIY scene.
She literally goes underground and dances in a circle ceremonially. Yeah.
It's very cool.
Honeychild, when you're DJing, how do you know where to start? How do you read a room? Tell me about.
It really
finding that
depends on the
feeling.
gigs. At this venue, which is a real place, Botanica Bar, this is during the Giuliani era. So one, no one's allowed to dance. Two, it was also like the early aughts when there was a lot of pent up energy in the city when all the Brooklyn bands kind of blew up. So a lot of the rock music was very dance-ish. So that party, we kept pretty high energy. And because it's Saturday night, we couldn't really play anything too mellow or too weird, or people would leave. So that was reading that room. But also, my partner Jen, if someone harassed us, would start playing Queensryche or speed metal, or like, something broken and loud and crazy, just to get people to leave us alone, and then we'd like go back to regular mixing.
I feel like you capture that energy really well on the page.
Thanks.
Yeah. How's the book going? I'm putting pressure on you right in front of a whole room of people.
I'm still editing, but yeah,
Okay.
it's good.
Good.
It's good.
Good.
So, Vernon,
Yes.
I'd love to hear your thoughts and.
Well, okay.
Real quick, I think Vernon Reid needs a proper introduction.
Yes.
Yeah. We're gonna embarrass you for a minute. I feel like the chemistry of my household changed when I was about 10, and my dad brought home the CD of Vivid by Living Colour, a groundbreaking black rock band. And speaking of music that makes your pits stink, I hear Cult of Personality, I start acting a fool. All-time iconic guitar riff. And Vernon was a co-founder of the Black Rock Coalition, has always put on for other black people with guitars. Living Colour is still touring and still killing it, still crushing it. A bunch of my friends just saw them in Virginia and were saying amazing things. And we are so pleased to have you with here tonight. It's an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So, thinking about punk, I mean, punk is both sort of a defined style of music, but it's an attitude. And when I think about punk, when I think about it, I think about things that were punk before they had the name punk. My very first concert I ever went to was in the early 70s. I'm that old. And it was Parliament Funkadelic. It's Parliament Funkadelic. It's actually Funkadelic. It was Funkadelic War and Rare Earth at Madison Square Garden. Wow. And at that time, George Clinton wore a mohawk. George Clinton wore a mohawk, and Gary Scheider wore a diaper. I mean, he was... And it was such an incredible show. And I didn't know what to call it because it was so energetic and it was so over the top that years later I would say, oh, that was punk. What I saw, what I heard, when there wasn't a name for it, to see Eddie Hazel. Eddie Hazel was in and out of the band at that time. So I actually saw them play Maggot Brain, which is a kind of legendary kind of gospel guitar instrumental. And so I tend to think of these things as all of this we're talking about is part of a continuum. When I think of Ornette Coleman was punk. Even though it was jazz music, he was very controversial with his harmonic theories of music. When I see Hendrix, pictures of Hendrix, and you see the looks on the audience's faces, like he's doing something that they can't comprehend. They don't know what it is. And at that moment, I mean, but interestingly enough, because Hendrix is boomer, right? It's like all the boomer dads love Hendrix. But at the point at which he'd set his guitar on fire at the Monterey Pop Festival, I can't think of anything more punk than that. His version of Machine Gun from the second set of the Band of Gypsies. Or if 6 was 9, in the lyric he says, if all the hippies cut off all their hair, I don't care. That's punk. His version of the Star Spangled Banner at the end of Woodstock is punk in continuum. George Clinton said to me, you know, that was the end. That literally Woodstock, the hippie thing was done. When I think about what Miles Davis did with Bitches Brew, I mean, that record right now is like, when you listen to it and you go, what the hell am I listening to? And I'll jump cut to seeing kids, you know, at the band parking lot, skateboarding. And that to me is connected. It's connected to me. And it transcends the styles of music on a level, the attitude that punk is. And part of it is, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you think. I don't care. It kind of goes past what people's opinions. It's an expression. I think in a moment, somebody's dealing with something really personal, but it's connected to every other thing that people are struggling with. And when I think about what happened with Afro-punk for you, and I could hear how difficult that was to see the commodification of Black uniqueness, Black oddness, and to have to walk away from it. I can't imagine how difficult that was for you. And I just want you to maybe talk a little bit more about it. From when was the moment that you know, I can't imagine when you said to yourself, I can't do this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to be asked this question now, like almost 2 decades later, because I've had a lot of time to process and heal, and you know, and I've been able to see things I've been able to see the reaction, you know, outside of my own personal reaction, but the reaction of both like what we call the APOGs, you know, the people who were at the liberation sessions back in the day, and the generation that came after. You know, if you think it's wild to think that movie came out over 20 years ago, so there's a whole generation of black kids who don't know a world without Afropunk, you know, even if it's just a fantasy through the computer screen, you know. So, you know, what was happening when it was first kind of starting to get big was this, you know, this question of, all right, we just did, you know, the third Afropunk festival was, one of the shows was a sold out show at CBGB's, you know, that's like a 350 cap, something like that. And it was like, man, that was amazing. Like, but think of all the black kids who don't know about it, who should have been in that room, you know? And we had a relationship with BAM, and through a lot of like wheeling and dealing that I don't know anything about, we were able to get the parking lot that is now this building right here, you know? And then it was presented to me as like, it can be all ages, which is like paramount to actually building a scene, which is what I was trying to do. There's a difference between putting on a bunch of shows and there being a scene, because my feeling is, at that time, was like, if I just stop, you know, me and my partner Matthew, if we stopped, it would be done. So that's not a scene, you know? There's got to be somebody else ready to pick up the reins, doing something else, whatever, you know? So it's got to be kids, you know? So all ages, and it was free, you know? It's like, great. How do we make it all ages and free, you know? Well, this parking lot fits a couple thousand people. How do we get a couple thousand people to come see a bunch of black punk bands? You don't. You start inviting hip hop acts, and you start inviting, you know, like alternative, you know, like you just stretch the boundaries of what punk is, right? And having grown up in the punk scene, I have a narrow definition of what punk is. It's like, it's pretty wide, but it's also like, like I agree with the energy and attitude of what you're saying about Miles Davis and all the people who came before and all the people who were around at the time. But I also push back on that, because if, you know, it got to a point, taken to the furthest extreme, where Afropunk, the brand, was publicly, they were speaking about anybody who's black is punk. So then I'm like, okay, well, if, you know, Black Wall Street guy is punk, then what does that mean about actual black punks? You know, once again, we're being pushed into this margin of the thing that the one thing we get to claim, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, so basically it just became a lot of compromises, you know? It's bringing in acts that are alternative because they have a guitar player, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like it's, you know, and there was like people on stage saying like homophobic stuff, and, you know, one group did a cover of Boom Bye Bye. And I was like, how is this happening at Afropunk, you know? And at that point, I actually got on stage and like had to do a whole like apology to the crowd and explanation that like, or assert that the gay people in our scene are our scene, you know? And we wouldn't have this scene without the queer people who are part of it, you know? Like in a real tangible way, like all the volunteers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they were just like, I mean, I can go through and I have like a 45-minute slideshow that explains the whole thing. But it is, I mean, it's just compromise after compromise that ultimately was like, I'm only in this for my community, and my community is being disregarded, you know? And I think the thing that snapped it, if anyone remembers the old Afropunk message board, the one that was black, and I mean, it was like a black screen with white writing. Man, me and my partner got into all these fights because it was like, it was just basic. You couldn't, there were no profiles. If you wanted to put up a picture, you had to go to Dropbox and Photo Bucket, remember Photo Bucket? Yeah. So you had to know like light HTML coding, And we were all fine with it, But it was like, no, we're never gonna get sponsors with this website, So it was just like, one day, new website. Now you can do all this stuff, but the whole message board is gone. Yeah. There's a new message board, but it was like for those people who went every day for 6 years, all their messages were gone.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who were just like, I'm out, And I kind of followed them,
That literally erased the history.
Yeah. And it was interesting to watch it over the course of the years as I was, I moved to the other side of the country to get away from it. And to not deal with the fallout, to not have to experience this new Afropunk or whatever. And, just to see it growing and reaching people. And, it's like I had a lot of negative things to say, but I also could recognize that, there's nothing wrong with having a place where Black folks can go and, smile and wave their freak flag for the weekend, Black people need Coachella, too. But at what sacrifice? So when is it okay for one group of displaced outsiders to gentrify out another group? And that was the question that was in a lot of our hearts for many years, and during those years, you might remember there was a whole lot of is Afropunk punk questions and articles and stuff. Those questions are gone. Now it's like Williamsburg. That ship is sailing, right? When we hear Afropunk, no one is confused that it's not punk. It's like being confused if Daft Punk. Why isn't Daft Punk punk? It's like we understand. So it's like in that way, the corporations won. But in the way that I was kind of alluded to in the intro, the way more exciting and interesting thing is that punks don't do anything unless they're reacting, right? Every movement in punk is a fuck you. Every single time, from the beginning all the way through. Riot Grrrl, Straight Edge, name the thing, it's reacting to something else. And it was in that, and I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time with this, but it's in that moment that those kids, from Philly, from Texas, whatever, who came to Afropunk expecting to find their underground Black community, and instead found what it is today. And we're like, wait, where's the rock? Oh, it's in that parking lot. You have to go through this thing, and people were calling it it was like the back of the bus stage. Ouch. And now it's gone. Now that it doesn't even exist at all. It's just
they put it
so it's just so those kids went there and were like, what the fuck? So they went back and they started their own thing. And those things, what's happening now around the country, is so much more interesting, not only than what Afropunk is doing, but even what we were doing. It's like and it's happening autonomously. It's 10 to 12 different collectives just all saying fuck you and then starting their own thing is exactly what needed to happen.
Break Free Fest in Philly is a Black and Brown punk fest. Decolonize Fest is in England somewhere?
In London. Decolonize is in Berlin.
Yeah.
But then there's Chigonas in the Pit in San Antonio. There's Black and Brown in Houston. There's 156 in, what are they called? There's basically, every major city has its own Black and Brown Fest, And then you have things like in LA where it's just the punk scene is so brown that they don't even say anything. It's like if you're white, you're the minority at any punk show in LA.
I also think about our like Little Richard conversation, where there's stuff, like black art that has punk energy, punk rebelliousness, punk irreverence, but it isn't punk. And so we kind of hesitate to like claim it as punk because we don't want to kind of diminish what that artist is doing for themselves, the identity that they're already asserting in such a kind of fraught environment. Like your Little Richards of the world.
Yeah, to follow up on that, because we had this conversation early on when we were putting the book together, like we have to decide what punk is, like for the book, right? And that's a fraught conversation, But for me, I'm like, Little Richard or Betty Davis, like those people, that proves to me that black people have always been wild. Black people have always been crazy. Black people have always had that piece, like pick a genre and there's somebody doing some outside the box stuff in it. And to call it punk almost puts it through a white framework, you know what I'm saying? When in fact they were doing it before that.
Well,
and so it's not to say that what you're saying is not, because it is the same energy, right? But for me, I don't want to look at an artist like a contemporary artist like her or something. Is that how did you say HER?
Either way.
I'm old. You know what I'm talking about.
She's shredding at the Super Bowl. Like, is she in the punk conversation?
Yeah, like I don't want to call her punk because R&B should also be allowed to be wild.
Yes.
And like Chris said, she's playing at the Super Bowl. Definitely not punk. If the Sex Pistols got back together and played the Super Bowl, definitely not punk.
We do draw some lines in the sand for sure.
Yeah. But that's a whole argument about like who gets to define it. And I think we all get to define it for ourselves.
I think that's the thing, because I don't think the argument is necessarily a bad thing,
Yeah.
depending on how the discussion is conducted.
Well, the way that and just to real quick to bring it back to the book, like this book is put out through Soft Skull, who is distributed by Penguin Random House. Okay, this book is not punk. This book is about punk. My last book was through HarperCollins, not punk. It's about punk, and I'm comfortable with that. So if we can just have the conversation like that, there's the underground and there's the mainstream, and never the two may cross.
Will they affect one another?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a beautiful marriage.
In '91, I went and we played the first Lollapalooza festival. And the main thing about Lollapalooza was the first kind of bunch of alternative bands, right? But the thing about that is that it was like a traveling carnival. And one of the aspects of the traveling carnival was there was always a traveling tattoo shop and a traveling body piercing shop. And I could say definitively that body piercing and tattooing became mainstream after Lollapalooza. You didn't see people with eyebrow rings. You didn't see librettes. You didn't see tongues. You didn't see your bank teller with a pierced tongue. That didn't exist. You really didn't see cops with sleeves. And what happened was this thing that was really, and now, like face tattooing, that was the most extreme form of body adornment. And
you used to be able to get the government would, if you had a face tattoo, you could go to some agency and be declared insane and get government money. Like that's why all the crust punks back in the 90s. Yeah. That's why all the crust punks back in the day would have like face tattoos, because they would go and get declared insane and get money.
Wow.
Now it's just regular.
Get SSI.
That's so scary.
That is genius. Wow.
I mean, things like that, you didn't see it, right? You didn't see people with tattoos on their necks. And after that, it just took off, and it's only gotten more mainstream. It's completely mainstream at this point. I want to ask Mariah about your interest in what was your pathway into fantasy, and who were the authors that influenced you to go into fantasy, and how did you feel you had to diverge from your influences?
Yeah, thank you. This fantasy is actually like not the genre that I typically write in. I do typically write realism, though I guess the next book I'm working on is like maybe a little bit off kilter. But for this in particular, I had for a really long time wanted to write about black hair and punk, just because it had affected me naturally for many years. And there was this 90s cartoon. It is on HBO or Max, whatever it's called. If anyone wants to go watch it, it's still there. And I think it's called Happily Ever After, a Fairy Tale for Every Child or something like that. And at first I was like, I thought I made that up and this was just a fake childhood memory, but I went back and found it. And so they just did, diverse takes on fairy tales. There's like a Chinese Little Red Riding Hood, and the Rapunzel version, Whoopi Goldberg voices the witch. It's animated. And I think it's a New Orleans version of Rapunzel. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to that because I didn't want to write an essay about myself and my hair. I wanted to, go into fantasy land. And so I went back to childhood and thinking about Rapunzel, but I was also thinking about the Anansi stories that I also grew up with. And so I looked through a lot of those and a lot of different versions of the same story, because these are oral traditions, so not everyone is the same. And then I just kind of pieced together what felt right. And I think that in terms of making my own, it was helpful that the source material wasn't like so deep in my mind. It was kind of like, I kind of remember that. Let me read it once and then I'll write my version. I'm not gonna study it too hard and get too hung up on the originals and that sort of thing. So I haven't written anything like that before in terms of a retelling, so it was fun. And it was very easy because the plot was already there. So I didn't have to worry about, is this getting boring, or do I need a twist or something? I just kind of copied what was already there.
You made a great point about media, about experiencing media at a certain age and then wondering if it actually happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember seeing a film called Carnival of Souls, and it was like this weird fever dream, and I thought to myself, did I see that, or did it, so I can totally identify with that experience. Chris.
Yeah.
I was absorbing some Black Card, and there's a really interesting aspect of Black Card where there's a tension between there's an interesting tension between individual, identity against group identity. Could you talk about that tension? What drove you to write about that?
Yeah. It actually, I think of Black Card as a reverse passing narrative. It's inspired by some of my own experiences, like reckoning with my multiracial Black identity while playing in punk bands in the South about 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And part of it is also, kind of feeling isolated from Blackness in some ways while in the lily white punk scene. And feeling like I'm bumping up against the representations of Black people that I'm seeing in the media, that I'm hearing on the radio, so I'm thinking well, I'm not exactly like Lil Jon and the East Side Boys, so am I Black? Just kind of getting these insecurities coming in. So that was some of the inspiration for the book, was thinking about a character who feels stuck, who kind of feels like they're meeting themselves as a Black person, learning to be Black in some ways in isolation. And as they do that, they're kind of shedding the world around them and the trappings of their social life, and having to become alone to start over. to become themselves. So it's kind of a happy ending, but also a loner ending. It feels like the moment before rebirth, maybe, is what I was going for. Yeah.
Did you ever get arrested for drunk bicycling? Did that happen? Did that happen?
So I don't know if my lawyer is in the building. It says fiction on the book. I've been drunk on a bike, and I've dealt with the police while drunk on a bike. I'll tell you those things.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll say with Black Card, it's inspired by my experiences. Like, if you go to Richmond, Virginia, the street names are real. You could make a map of the stuff that happens in the book, and the feelings are very real. But I did take a lot of poetic license with it as well. To protect the innocent and also to make kind of composite racists, because there's so many.
Composite racist.
Yeah. Why call out one guy?
Lexicon.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
Honeychild Coleman.
Yes.
Honeychild. When the 1865, that first album came out, I think I immediately tweeted the only band that matters, the year that it came out. I think the 1865 is such an extraordinary work. The band is killing, the record, all of the songs, and you talk about things, antebellum things, from a completely fresh angle. Could you talk about what inspired you with Don't Tread on Me?
This was, the idea kind of came up. Actually, Sasha thought of the idea of doing something reactionary after Trump was elected. And he enlisted me, because we had been trying to do a project together for about 5 years, kind of off and on. We wanted to talk about life after slavery. So some of the themes are from antebellum, but some are modern. It could go either way. But I did do a lot of historical research on some of the characters, specifically on Peggy, who's based on the real character Margaret Garner, who I learned about through, I want to say, tracing her roots. She had been born into slavery in Kentucky, which is where I'm from, and she had escaped freedom in Ohio and then got stolen back. So that whole song breaks down her story. And it's pretty brutal, but a lot of our history is. And I think having the punk platform to talk about it was really liberating. Just to be able to say, hey, we went through this, but we're still here.
It's incredible. I don't know if you don't know the Don't Tread on We, the 1865, you need it in your collection. You need it.
Yeah. We're going to turn it to the audience soon, too.
Yeah.
While we're talking to y'all, if y'all have any questions, get them ready. We'll be ready for you soon.
Can I give a comment?
Absolutely.
James, I probably should have told you this in the green room earlier, but I definitely it fell through the cracks in terms of the Afro-punk generations. This is when I think by the time I was in late middle school, early high school, it had already been co-opted very much. And so I was my lovely mom was so excited, oh, I found this Afro-punk thing for you. And I was looking, I was but it's not, I don't understand, I don't know these bands. This is not, I was is this guy a poser? I was very, for the longest time. And so I'm very happy that I then got to read more of your work and obviously be included in your work as well. But
I've worked really hard to distance myself and grit the narrative, right?
But it was hard to figure it out during, I think, those couple years in between. When I think you said there was still the back of the bus stage, but you hadn't quite. And I was just I don't know who I know a lot of bands. I would know these artists if they were punk, and they're not. And I was very upset, but I'm doing better now.
James, you beat the poser allegations.
You can call me a lot of things, but don't call me a poser.
Never again. I'm so sorry.
Do y'all have any? What questions do y'all have for us?
I'm going to preface, ask a question, Don't tell us your whole life story.
Oh, do we have a mic?
You can do that one-on-one. All right. In the yellow.
Yeah, hi. My question is actually for Mariah. When you were reading your excerpt,
Thank you. I'll start over for the live streamers. My question's for Mariah. When you were reading your excerpt, I couldn't help but listen and hear what felt like an Orisha story that I have heard through various different channels. And so I was wondering if that was something specific that you had read, or if that was just the universe showing off and being like, oh yeah, these things all keep connecting back.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's definitely subconscious. There's definitely Orisha imagery in my mother's home, and that is something that I grew up with as well. But I don't think I was specifically channeling it, but I'm sure that when I was thinking about, a magical Black woman, that was just in there very, very deeply. So thank you for picking up on that when I didn't even pick up on that.
Hey, hi. This is a question for Vernon Reid. As someone who is in the DC punk scene and completely influenced by the Bad Brains, and like my band opened for the Bad Brains at CBGB's, I know that you guys like the Bad Brains. I'd just love to hear, and we heard about Beyond the Bad Brains. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that band.
Of the Brains. Well, I mean, you can't overstate their importance. And certainly encountering them, at that time, like between the Roar cassette and Eye Against Eye, I can honestly say there are a few bands whose performances are really difficult to describe. When HR was full on, and the group was full on, they did things I haven't seen before or since. Like one time they were playing the old Ritz on 11th Street, and they were playing a song, and H did a standing somersault. He did a standing somersault and ended at the exact end of the tune. He created a field of energy around him that was, I think, for the audience, incredibly compelling, but also kind of terrifying. When the Ritz moved up to where Studio 54 is, they had a low balcony. They had a balcony. The balcony was maybe 10 feet above people's heads. And, they were playing maybe Eye Against Eye. And one person leapt off the balcony into the crowd. And then the entire floor became a pit of, like, people, the security guards couldn't do anything with people running up the stairs and jumping off the balcony. So it was, the whole floor was spinning, and people were running, and people were pouring off the balcony into the pit. And I've never seen anything like that. And the security guys were like, they were just... they're so important to the scene, and they were so important to Living Color. Like the song "Time's Up" is directly inspired by Bad Brains, the first song on our second album, and all the things that have happened since, because H has had some issues, and Dr. No has had some physical issues. I mean, it's very hard to see what's been happening recently, but thinking about, because they were influenced by jazz rock fusion as much as they were influenced by, so their whole thing was really intense, and there's not another band like them. And not just because of what they play, but the effect they have on their audience is, I've never seen anything like it. The only other thing is like Fishbone, when they were 17, you know, I opened, an early version of Living Color opened for Fishbone their first show at Irving Plaza, and they were about 17 years old, and insane. I mean, no. Extraordinary, really extraordinary. So, you know, I credit them a lot. You know, like hearing things that so much of this is how do you go forward? Because it seems impossible to do it. And those artists that take that walk into space, you know, they don't do it just for themselves. You know, they do it for all of the listeners and all of the players. And that's the important thing to bear in mind when you're experiencing these incredible, daring musicians. I'm thinking about Tamar Kali right now. Because Tamar Kali is original Afro-punk, and now she's a legit celebrated film composer. And
who's not here today because she's busting her ass writing something, like doing some composing at the moment.
And they had a profile on her in the New York Times, and they referred to her as a former punk, and I got really pissed off. And I called her, and I said, you were still a punk. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's the point. That a punk, a black female punk, has dared to enter into this rarefied realm of film composition. And that's crucial.
Mm-hmm. She once told me that there are more women who have gone to outer space than are actively composing for Hollywood films.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Yes.
Oh. Hi. I feel like I just came from the Board of Education panel meeting yesterday, so I'm having stage anxiety being on the panel.
You already dropped some medical knowledge on us. You are here. We are ready and excited.
Oh God! And thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna keep it short. I'm the band leader, front runner for a band 15 or so years ago called Raven Quiet, and I loved being a songwriter, and I loved performing on stage, but what I really enjoyed about it was band management. It was an unexpected joy of just booking shows. But since we're all in narrative mode, I just want to play along a little bit, because as a DEI person and, grew up in Flatbush and all this other type of stuff, I have one question primarily. And it has to deal with the culture of blackness. And I can direct this to James, but I also want Vernon to lean in a little bit, because in my understanding of just punk and music in general, where do you sit with punk being its own thing, but it's also a thing on a timeline of music that came before it and struggles that came before it? And how do you maintain it? Because I will go through this book again, because you said very specific things, especially reactionary and stuff like that, which I call the re-side of things, when you do react opposed to the pre and pro side of things and preventative care and stuff like that, right? Let's catch the problem before it's a problem, pre and pro, right? And then we're gonna react to something ill or something that's happening. But I say that because I'm curious to know where are you on the timeline, especially with Black punks and the ancestry and the heritage? You hear standing on the shoulders, but then stand in your own truth as punk.
I'm not sure the question, though.
Okay, I'm not sure neither. Punk on a timeline.
I have a thought if I could start directing it a little bit. I think there's kind of a paradox, and I'm really bumping up against that, especially as I get into my 40s, as I'm a parent. Part of punk is very irreverent, and it's like irreverent. Part of punk is very, it doesn't want to be beholden to what came before it. It's basically like, fuck you, mom and dad, right? You didn't hear that, kid.
Yeah, I heard that.
But it's also at the same time, I think punk often wants to historicize itself. It feels very marginalized. So you have punk wanting to kind of document itself and create this burden of history that it's also kind of fighting against. So you need to know your old punk bands, but you need to be trying to make something new all at once. And I think that same tension exists when punk interacts with, raw or rebellious rock and roll or political culture that came before it or other arts, and with stuff that popped up after punk as well. Does that kind of,
Right.
does that narrow
Because
down?
usually, again, I guess it may be a generational thing, but I take pride in whatever I do. Merging, I have a company, Trafunk Law, which is trauma and funk, and you're gonna write about it and put it someplace so you won't suffer in your body, right? Just put it someplace. But I always give praise to the people and the music and the writing that formulated my ass, right? And I just feel like you're not really owning the fact that punk is literally funk and jazz oppression that is not new to punk. And not to say that you have to, acknowledge that all the time, but just understand what comprises your ingredients in this punk soup.
Sure.
Right.
I think there's a few thoughts that I have. One is like whenever you approach writing a book, there's got to be like, or making any kind of art, you have to like create boundaries, otherwise you're just going to be all over the place. So with Afropunk, the film, I was like, I'm only talking to punk and hardcore people who describe themselves as punk and hardcore. I told myself the biggest band I'm going to talk to is Fishbone, right? So even though I would have loved to talk to Vernon, if I would have been able to get a hold of you at that point, like I wouldn't. It didn't fit in with the narrow scope of what I was trying to do, right? Or even though it would make sense, the stories would be the same, right? So I didn't talk to goth people, I didn't talk to metalheads. Like it was very specific, right? With this book, we decided we're going to give it a 20-year, we're going to look back 20 years. That's what now is going to be. And the reason is because every Black punk in this room has had the experience of being like, oh, punk, like Bad Brains, right? Fishbone, right? Like, and you're almost like saddled with, these are the only two bands I could possibly like because I'm Black, or this is your only reference point to me as a human being, because I also identify as these Black and punk, like these amazing artists. So we wanted to give shine to what's happening today. So that isn't to take away from what's happened before the last 20 years. It's just not now. Do you know what I'm saying? And with that, I think like Bobby Hackney's piece, he's in a band called Rough Francis, but his parents, his father and his uncles were in Death, the band that predates every punk band, So it's not like it's just like washed away, it's just focused, the book itself. The other thing that I think about, and I don't know if this is touching on your question or not, but being a an elder punk, you know, being like somebody who's reaching 50. Like I needed reaction, anger, you know, I needed to get into the pit to like let out my aggressions when I was a kid. That was the way that I dealt with that, with trauma, with just going on the subway from my house to 66th Street every day was like a battlefield every day. And I have horror stories. So going to a show afterwards and, you know, getting in a circle pit or like swinging my arms around, that was a release, you know? Now, I feel like there would be something wrong with me if I still, like my therapy was still to get into the pit, you know? Like, you know, I feel like the aggression would come out on me, you know what I'm saying? And to be reactive is too, I don't know, I feel like I should be able to be proactive, right? I should be able to be, like I've spent time working on myself in the way that I couldn't do when I was 15, right. You know? So, you know, so I think as an older punk rocker, it's appropriate to both reflect and celebrate the younger generation and stand in the back, you know, and just enjoy what's happening, you know?
And making this book was a way to participate so that we weren't out there getting our knees messed up in the pit.
Yeah. Which did happen to him at a Soul Glow show.
This is true. I got one ass over tea kettle up front of the show a couple years ago. I think we have time for one more quick question. Then we need to call it a night. We signed a bunch of books. We will gladly personalize them. We'll be here to talk for a while.
I also have copies of The High Desert and Afropunk, and Honeychild has some stuff. So we'll all be in the back.
And we're about to get a question from Black Punk Now contributor Matt Mitchell, I believe.
Yeah, it's me.
The lights deceiving me?
Woo. First of all, honored to be featured in this book. That's what's up. Also, the blackboard. I was tearing up when you were talking about that.
Stand it up. Stand
yeah,
up.
you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, thanks.
This is the very first webmaster for Afropunk.com. Even before that, when it was High Yellow Productions.
That's right. Mad love to all y'all. Okay, quick questions. Favorite punk band, question number one. Past, present, current, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Doesn't have to be a black punk band, but I know where your heart is, always. Second question is, what's a way that we can support y'all? You all are so important to us as a people, and we are your community, back and forth, you know what I'm saying? Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm listening to Sweeping Promises a lot right now. It's just really fun, poppy, female vocalist. She's South Asian. Yeah, I mean, definitely my most listened to artist of last year. And I think, I'm thrilled that you all came. I called up the Center for Fiction when I saw that they were charging, and I was like, nobody is going to pay to see us. So, that's amazing. I really appreciate it. Just buy books and tell your friends, Yeah.
I think my favorite punk band right now is one in LA called Generación Suicida. It's like a Spanish language punk band with clean guitars and big anthems. I agree. Being here tonight means a whole lot, and that goes to all three of you on the stage as well. But yeah, by all means, tell your friends, post a pic, write a review online. Keep buying books. Read them too, please.
Okay, this is like picking a favorite child. I don't have any children. I don't know why it says that. I really like a Singaporean mathy emo band right now called Forests. And if I can have a second one.
Yes, you can.
A band that is it's emo violence, because we don't want to say screamo anymore. I don't know. Nate called Frail Body from Illinois. Yeah. Oh, and books.
My new favorite local punk band is Winterwolf. I'm kind of their punk rock auntie. To me, they are like the future of punk and electronics mashed together, which are two of my favorite things. So I always want to big up them and throw them in playlists. The best way to support me is definitely buy the book, tag me in things, reach out directly. I also have a zine that I published for the first time of lyrics and poetry.
Is it for sale tonight?
I have it tonight, yes.
So there's a young guitarist named Malcolm Brickhouse. He was the guitarist for Unlocking the Truth. And he's been doing his own things. If you get a chance, check out some of the videos he's put out on YouTube. The Living Color, we just finished a tour of a couple of months, and we had a band from Kansas City named Radkey.
Yeah.
And they're three blood brothers, and they're really great. I really like them, so I recommend them. I've been hearing this. There's a vocalist. She's not punk, but really extraordinary vocalist named Yeba Smith. And I mean, also, ironically, also named Smith, Willow Smith. I love her record, Defense Mechanism. She comes by her dysfunction honestly. And both Yeba and Willow are doing a kind of punk bel canto, right? Like it's really punk, but actually Yeba's kind of like she's like Adele but from the holler, right? It's like trailer park bel canto, and extraordinary. There's a song, it's a ballad called Paranoia Purple that it's got me messed up right now. Like I'm gonna listen to it after this is all over. It's fabulous. For myself, I'm on Instagram and the dregs of what was once Twitter. I'm Vern22, and I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads. And you can check us on I did a bunch of these videos just wandering around truck stops, and you can check out my ramblings and things like that. I think the last thing I want to say is we're still unpacking. When you go back and think about how all of this started, I feel very connected to CBGBs, and I want to mention Hilly Crystal. And one of the things I talked to Hilly Crystal was the manager of the Village Vanguard. And so at one point he was talking about he was there when Coltrane was blowing everything up. And part of his thing was just he was open to, all kinds of music. I've seen country and western, I've seen electronics, everything at that club, and I wouldn't be here without that space. And the other thing we mentioned really briefly, Little Richard came up, who's a progenitor of glam. There's no glam without him. Well, he was a protege of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Yes. And Sister Rosetta Tharpe, I mean to tell you, she is a better guitarist than Chuck Berry. Like, I'm not even being facetious. Like, listen to her on those gospel sides, on her Les Paul, and she's blowing it up. And she's only gotten her due in maybe the last 20 years. So there's a lot of unpacking to do in terms of the past, but also moving forward. And the last thing I'm gonna say is, Honeychild is a fashion icon. Because punk was also a fashion movement. Yes. Malcolm McLaren and Vivian Westwood, they kind of designed what it was going to be. And truly, Honeychild Coleman is an avatar. All of that.
Thank you.
All right. thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
Vernon, Honeychild, Mariah, thank you for joining James and I.
Thank you.
Premise of Fiction, thank you.